Today, we are 3D printing miniature Warjack rifles of the assault variety, and for good measure, we're putting a bayonet on them as well. Welcome to the Tabletop Battlefield. I'm Jason, and this is the show where we gotta tiptoe around hot button political issues that have absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, but YouTube does not know the difference. Today we're getting back into Blender for tabletop wargaming as I'm creating some custom weapons for my Iron Star Alliance Warjacks for Warcaster Neo-Mechanika, but this process can work great for other games like Warmachine, Hordes, Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, or Battletech, or whatever you want if you want to give your units a bit of a unique and custom flair. On the Blender side of things, this is not a difficult tutorial, but you have to have some basic understandings and things like navigating around Blender, using the interface, moving objects around, edit mode with vertices and manipulating edges and faces, and a little bit of modifier work, in particular the Boolean operation. So with those details out of the way, let's dive into Blender and get this build started. Getting started here, I have a few things set up inside of Blender. First of all, I have two reference images of my Warjack with the assault rifle and bayonet. Now, I'm not trying to duplicate the actual miniature piece that Privateer Press has created, but I want to use these images as a reference because the thing that I end up creating, I want it to look like it belongs in the world of Warcaster. And then finally, in the middle, I have an empty plane. The sole purpose of this plane here is to give me a size reference to the final piece. Now we're going to start building all the individual pieces of our new weapon. The first step is to build the barrel. I'm just taking a cube, rotating it 45 degrees, and stretching out to the length of the barrel for the weapon. Then I'm making a duplicate copy of it, reducing it down in size, but increasing its length. Then I'm using a Boolean operation here, a difference, to cut out the inside of the barrel. To add this barrel extension, we're already getting dangerous, and I'm pulling out the knife tool, and I'm cutting straight across the entire barrel. Be sure to use the Z and C key to kind of lock in a straight line and cut through the entire object. This is going to allow me to extrude the two faces out, do some vertex manipulation, and end up with this angled barrel extension look I have going on here. To create the top half of the barrel shroud, I started with a cube. From there, I did some scaling, extruding, and also used a loop cut to add the extra geometry I would need to get the kind of somewhat complex angled sides that I was looking for this piece. After those were created, it's really just a matter of moving vertices around until I got to the desired angles and overall shape and size relative to the barrel. Now on to cutting out the cooling vents that run along the barrel shroud. I'm starting with 12 loop cuts. Now 12 is chosen because each of these cooling vents is going to require 4 new loop cuts. I'm holding up 5 fingers as I say that, but that's the reason why I'm not on camera right now. After making these loop cuts, you want to bunch them into groups of 4 and scale them down so they're about 6 millimeters-ish, but the exact size is up to you. Then for each of the sets, push the 2 inside loop cuts pretty close to the outside. Now what you're going to notice once you do this to all 3 of these cooling vents is that the top of the barrel shroud is no longer nice and smooth because of all the scaling. So we got to fix that. Now you can kind of eyeball it if you want to, but one easy way to do is do this little trick I'm showing right now. I'm taking a plane and angling it such that the top is kind of lining up with what I want the desired top of the shroud to be. And then from there I can very easily manually line up each of these vertices in edit mode so that its slope matches the slope of the template I've got here. After that, I'm just taking the inside 2 vertices of each cooling vent and moving them up. So therefore you get a little bit of notch, kind of like what you see in the actual piece in Privateer Press. And as a little side effect here, I discovered this creates, by accident, these little flanges that stick out. They're sticking a little bit far out, but I kind of like this look, so I'm going to scale them in a bit and keep it. Now I'm just adding more detail to the barrel shroud, and I'm accomplishing this through some loop cuts and then extruding some faces, doing a little bit of scaling to give some nice angles. But hey, I've got a few extra details that look really nice, and being a resin 3D print, we can do cool things like this. With the top half of the shroud complete, and I'm happy with it, I'm going to duplicate it and move it to the bottom of the barrel, but I got to make a few modifications because the front of it is a little bit different on the top than it is on the bottom because of the extended barrel on top. Now while I'm at it here, let's start working on the bayonet and the bayonet attachment point. Now both of these are going to be cubes, at least they're going to start out as cubes, because in science fiction miniatures, nearly everything can be made from a cube. I want to make sure in object mode I apply scale. So Control A, choose scale. That'll make the math for the bevel work correctly. The one cool thing I'm doing with the blade here is using the bevel tool to get a bit of a cool effect with it. And then for the attachment point, all I'm doing is doing more loop cuts, extruding some things, and just kind of moving stuff around to give it a little bit of a cool sci-fi angled look. And one free tip when it comes to blades on miniatures. Now, of course, in the real world, any kind of blade is really thin, a couple millimeters for the most part. But in miniatures, you want to make them bigger than they really are in terms of scale, right? Because otherwise, if you made them the proper scale width, they'd be way too thin and would snap off. So you got to make them bigger so that they can actually be practically used on a miniature. Building the receiver of the rifle is pretty much just like building the rest of it. We're starting off with a handful of cubes. We're going into edit mode, moving vertices around, doing some loop cuts to add more geometry, extruding faces, adjusting positions to give more of that cool sci-fi angled look that I like. If you ever need to make it sci-fi, just angle it a bit. And then again, adding a few more objects here and there. And in the end, we've got something that looks kind of like it belongs in Warcaster, but there's one more thing we want to add. And the last part of this build is going to be the magazine for the weapon. And this is where 3D printing can do some neat tricks. Now, Privateer Press has to make the little weapon bits to be ambidextrous, so you can put them on the left or right arm of the Warjack. Therefore, for their design, it's all symmetrical across basically the axes of the barrel that runs, down the length of the rifle. But with 3D printed parts, we can mirror them in our slicer, and therefore create unique parts for the left and right arms. And I can do something like this where the magazine for the weapon sticks out to the side. I know it's not really practical and not many firearms do this, but it looks cool and looks sci-fi. It's just ridiculous. But I'm going to do it anyway. And for creating this whole magazine, it's the same thing like the rest of the weapon at this point. We're taking more cubes, doing more loop cuts, extruding things, adding a few bevels here and there. And it's all about just doing those same 4 or 5 different operations over and over again until you get a final product that you like. And with that, we are just about done. The last step is going to be to join all these things together. So I want to select all the parts of the weapon, but be sure not to select any of these planes in the back. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and press H to hide them. And then box select the entire weapon. I want to left click on some part of it, press Control J to join it all together. And with that, let me just export this thing as an STL file. So we're going to go up to File, Export, choose STL. And we'll save this on your computer wherever you want. And when you are on the STL export screen here, make sure you choose the option Selection Only. Otherwise, some other parts like those planes, and maybe if you have other weapons sitting around, those will get exported as well, and you usually don't want that. Import it into your slicer program you use for your resin 3D printer. Mirror it for the right or left arm, or in this case, I'm going to mirror it and print one for each because I want my Warjack to have 2 of these. And this is what you're going to get. And there we go, our 3D printed, oh, I don't want to say that word, that combination of 3 words. Our 3D printed Warjack bits, they're done. And they look freaking awesome on the actual gaming miniature. And like I said, with a little bit of practice and some experimentation, you can make any weapon in the world you want for your tiny little gaming pieces. Stupid YouTube algorithm. But that's it for today. So thank you guys all for watching. Once again, I'm Jason. If you like these Blender for tabletop gaming videos, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and of course, there's a playlist somewhere that if you really want to see about 17 more videos of making stuff, that's an option as well. So have a great week, everybody.